Good morning. I was one of your discussion leaders this week for discussion forum number one. In discussion forum number one, we discussed the board's role in fulfilling its duty for financial oversight and really in some decision-making responsibilities. We talked about the importance of budgets, audits, and we briefly mentioned a little bit about 990s. Some of the things I wanted to talk about in this video today were some high-level highlights of our conversations in discussion forum number one. Some things the group talked about in terms of the duty by the board members for its fiscal oversight. Talked about risk. Really, it talked about risk and understanding the risks both posed to board members themselves in terms of the legal duty for fiscal oversight, and if done poorly, the risks they can face, the legal risks they can face if they are found negligible. Other risks we talked about is really to the overall organization, and a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding can really put the organization itself in jeopardy because of the poor decision making made by the board members based on a lack of understanding. So that led to some discussions around how board members need to be literate but not necessarily experts. So I think that point was brought up quite a few times in terms of the fact that they need to have an overall understanding, but no one really is expecting them to be experts. Some of the things they need to be literate on are balance sheets, profit and loss statements, and budgets. And these three financial pieces of information really represent the present, the past, and the future financials, so they can really make decisions based on information for immediate purposes as well as looking into the future. Other things we talked about were the importance of audit and finance committees and their role. We talked about how the type of person that should run both of these committees, and they are those in the fields of financial management, such as a CPA or an attorney, and how the CPA really should educate the full board at the time when the audits are being finalized, and they should give an audit report to the full board, not just seclude that to the finance committee. In this same thread, we talked about the importance of independent audits and how these independent audits helps support donor trust. It helps because it's a third-party analysis, so it's objective, not subjective. And then how some of these audits are necessary for organizations that look for funding, both either grant funding, federal or state, or even from private foundations. So some other key things we talked about was really trainings and education for the board on their fiscal responsibilities. We talked about how it is the responsibility of the CEO and the executive director to make sure the board is trained. Some tools they can do to ensure that include onboarding, ongoing trainings, offering them throughout their individuals' board tenures. We talked about some other tactics in terms of sending materials ahead of time, so those board members that may not be really savvy with the financials can study them and then come to the meetings educated and confident in their questions. We did talk about the benefits of a third-party consultant to do the trainings and carry out educational sessions, how a third-party consultant really can elevate the information and carry more weight for the board members. Following that same thread of discussion, we talked about the hesitation of certain board members that are a little unsure about the financials, and how we as professionals sometimes assume if they're in that role, they understand, and the reality is that they don't, and how it's up to the CEO and the ED and the development professionals to ensure that they educate the board so that they can feel confident and not embarrassed to bring up questions for something that they don't understand. And some other things we briefly talked about is how we can identify financial distress of the board. And I think the overall conversation on that really talked about complacency of the board, and that's a key flag for financial distress. And then if we continually see rubber stamping of the board members. And lastly, I just wanted to mention that we did talk about how important it was to have a diverse board. That way we can choose individuals that have expertise in the specific fields to appoint for a treasurer, for example, so that there's a confidence level in that individual to carry out their duty as a board member and their fiscal responsibility. So the conversation went great. It was a lot. Obviously, with 20-some students in the class, there is a lot of threads to look through. So kudos, Professor. People did share some personal and professional stories in relation to their experience that did help guide the conversation and really give us a perspective of what people are going through right now in their real life jobs and examples. So overall, it was a great discussion, and I appreciate you allowing me to be your discussion forum leader this week. Thank you.